I'm Bo, 35, founder of a retail startup built from ramen, secondhand laptops, and too many quiet nights alone. At Thanksgiving dinner, I raised a glass to share my $15 deal, and my father set his fork down and said, "You're just a low-life dropout who got lucky." I paid off their mortgage, their medical bills, and my brother's tuition. They never called it help. But the only sound I remember was the soft knock of my bracelet hitting the porch as I walked out into the lemon-scented night. If you've ever built something they never wanted to see, tell me, where are you listening from? They handed me the award just as my phone buzzed. Startup of the Year, retail innovation etched in glass. The kind of plaque you'd find sitting behind a real CEO's desk. People clapped, flashbulbs blinked. I smiled for the camera, shaking hands with people in tailored suits who just learned my name. Then I looked down. A text from Mom. "Don't forget Clayton's grad school interview is today." I stood there, holding a piece of engraved validation, and realized it still didn't register in the world I came from. My name is Bo Whitmore. I'm 35. I live in Greenville, South Carolina, and I built a $15 million startup called Try On, a retail platform that lets women try clothes on a 3D model built from their actual shape. Real bodies, real fit, real feedback. We're not a Silicon Valley story. I coded half of it from a rented desk inside a strip mall next to a donut shop. No trust fund, no MBA, no family cheering me on. In the Whitmore family, success came in caps and gowns. You didn't make it, you earned it through institutions. My dad, Franklin, spent 30 years in the same accounting firm. Same desk, same tie rotation. His world was built on balance sheets, degrees on the wall, and measurable returns. My mother, Marjorie, taught high school English. She graded essays in red ink, kept a bookshelf of Faulkner and Steinbeck, and believed spelling errors were moral failures. And then there was me, Bo, the middle child. Savannah was the teacher like Mom. Clayton was the engineer like Dad. I was the creative one, which in our house was code for unemployed with ideas. When I called to tell them about the award, I thought I'd try a new angle. Keep it casual, understated. "Hey," I said when Mom picked up. "Just wanted to let you know I got a little recognition tonight." Pause. "Is it about Clayton's interview?" "No, it's..." I adjusted the phone, staring at the award on the hotel nightstand. Try On won Startup of the Year, Regional Retail Innovation. A longer pause. "Oh," she said. "Well, that's nice. Just make sure you don't get too distracted. This is a big step for your brother." The next morning, I drove to the airport before dawn. The city hadn't even turned the traffic lights off blink mode yet. I stood in line at security behind a man in scrubs and a teenage girl holding a clarinet case. At the gate, I called Dad. I shouldn't have. He picked up with that clipped, businesslike tone he used for non-clients. "Morning," he said. "Hey, Dad. Just heading back from Raleigh. We had a pretty good night. Try On got that Regional Innovation Award I mentioned a while back." Silence. Then, "You know, Clayton won a trophy in 8th grade for his science fair project. Built a full-scale bridge out of toothpicks, real precise. I kept it in my office for years." I smiled without smiling. "I remember. You took a picture of it, right?" "It's framed. Sits by my calculator." He didn't ask about Try On, didn't ask about the deal we were negotiating with a national chain, or the fact that my team had grown to 28 people, or that we had doubled revenue year over year. He said, "Glad you're doing okay. Travel safe," and hung up. At gate B9, I pulled the award plaque out of my bag and set it on my lap. Dad looked smaller now. Not physically, just emotionally. I tapped open the video of the award ceremony. The room clapped. I shook hands. The camera panned, but all I saw were strangers. No mom, no dad, no family in the front row. I'd spent a decade building something I thought they'd finally be proud of. But maybe pride was never theirs to give. Maybe they'd already decided who mattered most in our family a long time ago. And I'd just missed the announcement. The flight boarded. I slid the plaque back into my backpack. As I reached for my wallet, something fell out. A string bracelet, frayed, uneven, darkened by time. I made it in 5th grade at a school fair. Braided it with colors I thought Mom would like. Dusty pink, pale blue, gray. I gave it to her on Mother's Day. She smiled, said thank you, then tucked it away in a drawer I later found it in, still pristine. I kept it, always did. Never really knew why. I rubbed the threads between my fingers like it still meant something. Then slipped it back into my wallet. Just as the flight attendant called Group C, a notification popped up on my screen. Subject: Florida Startup Retreat. Keynote opportunity from Trina McCall. I didn't recognize the name. I barely skimmed the message. I hit delete. I wasn't in the mood to hear from strangers. I was still waiting for someone familiar to notice I'd become something worth seeing. The roast was cooling faster than the conversation. Savannah was in the middle of a story about a 2nd grader who tried to sneak a ferret into show and tell. She had the timing down. The pause before the punchline, the raised eyebrow, the lean in for the laugh. Everyone around the table chuckled, including Dad, who rarely laughed at anything that didn't involve taxes or a well-timed pun. Mom reached for her wine glass, smiling like the joke had been rehearsed just for her. I kept slicing the roast I'd brought, unasked. The kind they liked, rubbed with rosemary and garlic, cooked low and slow. I'd made it the night before while tweaking our AI model's tagging behavior for irregular silhouettes. I wasn't sure which felt more ignored, the roast or the algorithm. Clayton jumped in after the laughter died down. My advisor says I might be able to integrate real-time data from wearables into my thesis if I can get access to the sleep lab next semester. Dad nodded. Smart. Real applications. That's where it's all going. Real-time health feedback. You'll be ahead of the game. I cleared my throat lightly. We've been testing a beta AI feature on Tryon. Lets users preview fabric behavior based on temperature and humidity changes. Kind of simulates real-life wear before purchase. Silence. Then Dad raised his eyebrows, just slightly. You should patent that, if it's real. I gave a small smile. It is. He didn't ask more. No one did. Mom passed the rolls. The moment passed with them. The dining room hadn't changed since I was 12. Still that deep green wallpaper, the framed quilt blocks Savannah made in middle school, the antique silverware we only pulled out for occasions. Apparently, Sunday dinner still counted. There was a family photo on the wall. Christmas, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Clayton stood dead center, arms crossed, chin lifted just a touch. Savannah was angled toward him, laughing at something off camera. I was in the back, half turned, one eye blurry from motion. That was my place, then and now. Visible, but never framed. Bo, Clayton said, leaning toward me, voice low enough that it didn't break the surface tension of the table. Have you thought about finishing your degree? I blinked. What? He smiled, apologetic. Just thinking, it might give you stability, long term. I wanted to say, I paid for your stability. I paid for his tuition, his car, the last 2 semesters' rent when he didn't want to move home. Instead, I just nodded and sipped the wine I'd brought. Cabernet, something decent. After dinner, as we stacked plates and rinsed off crumbs of cornbread, I wiped my hands and tried again. I was thinking, maybe y'all would like to see the try-on office sometime. We've just expanded, moved into a new space last quarter, got a photo wall, testing zone, all of it. Mom said, "That's nice." Dad grunted. "We might be able to swing by next week." "Any day works," I said quickly. "I can show you the customer journey flow, let you meet the team. We've got great folks on board." "Just keep it short," Dad added. "We've got a 4 o'clock appointment." Later, as I put on my coat, I looked at that family photo again. The blur hadn't been a camera problem. It was a placement problem. I'd never been in focus. And maybe that's why I kept trying to build something big enough for them to finally see. "Do we need visitor badges for this kind of place?" That was the first thing Mom said as they stepped into the try-on lobby. "Not hello? Not this looks impressive." Just that. I smiled anyway. "No badges. You're VIPs today." Dad looked around like he was inspecting a used car. Savannah lingered by the front desk, her gaze floating toward the wall of customer photos. Real women, not models. Smiling in outfits they'd bought using our platform. "We rotate the photos every month," I said. "It's part of our mission, body diversity, real-world shopping experience. These are some of our top community contributors." Mom blinked. "They're not professional?" "That's the point." I guided them down the hallway, past the glass-walled conference room and into our main operations area. "This is our dev team," I said, gesturing to the crew tapping away at keyboards and sketching UI flows on whiteboards. "Over there's marketing, and back there, customer support. We keep it in-house to stay close to user pain points." Savannah leaned in, whispering, "You built all this?" I nodded. From nothing. She didn't say anything else, but her eyes stayed wide. Mom walked past a row of desks and tapped a coffee mug with our logo on it. "You know," she said, "you seemed happier when you were stocking shelves at that grocery store. Remember that little job you had in high school? You loved talking to customers back then." I breathed through my nose and kept moving. "This is where the money goes, huh?" Dad said, eyes settling on a large screen displaying real-time traffic metrics. "We just crossed 4.3 million sessions this quarter," I replied. "We're optimizing return visit rates, rebuilding the recommendation engine with LLM-based behavior tagging." Dad grunted. "If it works." I took them to the new space we just leased. An open lounge area with soft lighting, a demo station, and framed user testimonials on the wall. I had left a printed snapshot of our basic profit statement on the table, something simple but real. No jargon, no bluffing. "We've been profitable the past 4 quarters, I said. "Margins are clean. We're investing smart. Team salaries, tech stack improvements, customer engagement." Dad picked up the paper, flipped it over like he was looking for the trick, then set it down. "Well," he said, "let's hope it lasts. You know these internet things." Savannah glanced at me, then at Dad. "He built it from scratch, Dad," she said softly. "No investors, just grit." Mom cleared her throat. "Is there a restroom nearby?" I pointed to the corner and watched them go. Dad following Mom like it was just another errand stop. They left early. Said they had a furniture delivery scheduled. No handshake. No good job. No, we're proud. Just a half wave from the parking lot. Dad already halfway into the driver's seat. Back upstairs, I stood alone in the hallway. The quiet heavier than I expected. I watched our designer walk by with a roll of mock-ups. She smiled. I smiled back. But it felt like someone else's smile. In my office, I opened my wallet to grab my keys, and something slipped out, a frayed loop of string. The bracelet. I knelt down and picked it up from the carpet. The colors had faded, blue, pink, and gray, woven together like a forgotten intention. I stared at it for a moment, then opened the top drawer of my desk and laid it inside. Not in the trash, not on display, just put away. Because maybe they didn't hate my success. Maybe they just didn't believe it was mine to begin with. The sun was warm enough to press through my shirt collar, and the banners along Main fluttered like we were in some movie town that never ran out of cheerful budget. It was fall for Greenville. South Carolina's favorite excuse to close down traffic, crank up live music, and pretend we all had something to celebrate. I stood at the back of the crowd, hands in my pockets, the hem of my jacket brushing against folding chairs with reserved signs I hadn't been invited to occupy. On stage, Savannah smiled under a banner that read, Educator of the Year, sponsored by community partners. She looked good up there, confident, like she belonged. And to be fair, she did. I funded this year's festival, quietly, wrote the check, paid for the lights, half the permits, and the thank you bags they'd hand out to the sponsors. My name was listed on page 7 of the printed program, in 10-point font under in-kind contributors. The announcer stepped up to the mic, voice booming. Let's hear it for Ms. Savannah Whitmore, our Teacher of the Year. The crowd roared. Someone popped confetti. A kid waved a handmade sign that said, Ms. Whitmore rules. And thank you to our anonymous donor, the announcer added without missing a beat, whose generosity made today possible. Anonymous. I felt something between a laugh and a lump rise in my throat. My name wasn't needed, apparently not even welcome. A friend from high school, Tyler Evans, leaned toward me from the row ahead. Didn't you fund this? He whispered. I shrugged. What for? I said, eyes still on the stage. He gave a small, respectful nod. The kind men offer each other when they can't fix what's broken. Dad was seated a few feet away, his legs crossed, one arm draped lazily over the back of Mom's chair. He didn't turn toward me, just said aloud, to no one in particular, the real kind of giving is the kind you don't need credit for. Mom nodded like it was scripture. I wasn't sure if they even remembered I was there. I watched as Savannah held her plaque and thanked the crowd. She mentioned her students, her colleagues, not me. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she chose not to. That's the thing about being invisible. After a while, even the people you love stop looking for your shape in the room. As the music played and the next speaker took the stage, I slipped away down a side street. The festival noise faded behind me like a TV in another apartment. I ducked into a cafe, half full, quiet enough to think, and pulled out my phone. There were a dozen texts I hadn't answered. One from a staffer asking about content approvals, one from Savannah that just said, "You made it?" I hadn't replied. Still didn't. Then I opened Lee Kingsley's contact. My thumb hovered over her name. She'd been pushing me to consider acquisition, said we'd reached the edge of what Tryon could do alone. I'd resisted, told her I wanted to keep control, protect the culture. But standing there that day, erased in public by my own family, I felt something shift. I'd been building and waiting for recognition, maybe even redemption. But you can only stand in the wings so long before you realize no one plans to call your name. I hit dial. She picked up fast. "Bo? I'm ready," I said. "Let's reopen talks." A pause. Then her voice, calm and precise. "You've got a window, Bo. 7 days. After that, it's off the table." That night, I sat on my balcony as dusk folded itself over the city. I scrolled through posts from the festival. Balloons, barbecue, line dancing in the street. Savannah's picture was everywhere, smiling with her students. The comments glowed. Buried halfway down was one from a name I didn't recognize at first. Trina McCall. She'd sent that email weeks ago, the one I never read. Her comment said simply, "The people backstage often carry the whole show." I stared at those words longer than I meant to, longer than I expected they'd stay with me. The text came just before the second clause of the acquisition agreement. "Your father wants to know if you can cover Clayton's final semester." No greeting, no context. Just the ask, dressed in the polite tone of "your father wants," like this was diplomacy, not expectation. I stared at the screen, thumb resting above the keyboard, while across from me, Lee Kingsley adjusted her glasses and looked up from the printed draft. "This clause lets you retain creative control through the transition," she said, tapping the highlighted portion. "But only for 18 months. After that, you're advisory, not executive." I nodded like I was present, like my mind wasn't 500 miles away, at a kitchen table I hadn't sat at since spring. We were in Sarasota. Clean lines, cool-toned boardroom, ocean visible from the windows, though today the blinds were down. Lawyers passed papers between themselves in the quiet choreography of closing big deals. And here I was, checking my phone for a message I didn't even want to answer. I texted back, "Let me call you." A minute later, I was out in the hallway, holding the phone to my ear as it rang. Mom picked up on the second try. "Bo," she said, like I was interrupting her afternoon nap. "You got the text?" "I did," I said, "and I have a question for you." "Okay. Did you know I'm signing a deal today? That it's going to change my life?" A pause. Then, "Well, that's nice, dear. God is providing." I could have laughed. I should have. But instead, I stared at the framed print in the hallway. An abstract landscape in blues and grays, the kind you pick from a corporate art catalog. It made me feel oddly comforted, like something in the world would stay muted and orderly, even when my family couldn't. "Clayton's just trying to stay on track," Mom added. This would mean so much to him. Of course it would. It always did. I said I'd think about it. She thanked me like I'd already said yes. Back in the boardroom, Lee watched me as I sat down. "Everything good?" she asked. "Same old," I said. "Family logic." She raised an eyebrow, but didn't pry. That was part of why I liked working with her. She only asked when it mattered. We kept working through the agreement, paragraph by paragraph. My phone lit up again an hour later. This time, it was Dad. A rare direct call. I stepped outside to answer. "Hey," I said. He didn't waste time. "Look," he began, "Clayton's doing well. He's making us proud. But we all know the costs of grad school these days." I kept silent. "I just want to be sure we're not throwing money around when we don't know how long it'll last," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "These .com dollars," he replied. "They come quick and leave quicker. Degrees last longer. Think about that before you make it all disappear." I clenched my jaw, counted to 3. "You don't have to believe in what I'm doing, Dad," I said. "But could you at least not talk to me like I'm gambling your retirement?" He didn't answer that. Just said, "Thanksgiving's at 6. Hope you can make it." That evening, back at the office, everyone else had left. The room held that strange after-hour silence, where the lights hum and your thoughts echo. I sat at my desk, opened a blank notepad, and wrote without thinking. I'm not a miracle. I'm a result. I tore the page loose and slid it under my keyboard. Maybe one day I'd need to read it again. Maybe not. At home, I poured myself a glass of something dark and not too expensive. I didn't toast, didn't sit down. I stared out the window instead, into a Florida evening that smelled faintly of salt and forgiveness. Then I opened my phone and texted Savannah. "I'll be there for Thanksgiving." She replied almost instantly. I figured, just be ready. Lee's message came an hour later. Simple, direct. 7 days left. The deal closes with or without you. I didn't respond. Not yet. Some decisions need silence before signature. Thanksgiving at the Whitmore house smelled like tradition. Sage, butter, baked apples, a faint undercurrent of lemon polish on hardwood floors. The table gleamed. Every fork aligned, every candle lit, every roll rehearsed. I brought the wine. No one thanked me. The seating chart hadn't changed in years. Mom at the head, Dad to her right, Clayton beside him, then Savannah. I took the chair at the far end, opposite the family portrait, beneath the old clock that ticked loudest when the room got quiet. "Savannah, your sweet potatoes are heaven," Aunt May drawled, spooning more onto her plate. "Not too sweet, not too bland." Savannah blushed politely. "It's the nutmeg, just a pinch." Clayton had already launched into a story about his research project. Something about sleep cycles, wearable tech, cortisol measurements. Dad nodded like a man watching his own reflection. I waited, listened, let them build the scene. Then I reached for my glass and stood. "I wanted to share something," I said, voice steady. "Tryon just received a formal acquisition offer. $15 million. We're finalizing the deal next week." The room stilled, not like awe, more like brakes. Savannah clapped once, then looked around as if checking if she was allowed to continue. "That's incredible," she said softly. Mom smiled, tightly. "Just promise you'll stay humble." I nodded once. "Always." Dad reached for his wine, sipped, set the glass down like it had betrayed him. "So what happens when it fails?" he asked. "What will you have left?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" He didn't look up, just sliced his turkey. "You're betting everything on code and clicks. Real success doesn't vanish when a server crashes." "I've spent the last 7 years building this," I said, "supporting the team, supporting this family." He looked at me now, fully, like I was something on his plate he hadn't ordered. "I remember when you dropped out," he said. "You told us you had a plan, told us we didn't need to worry. Now you're here throwing numbers around like they make you legitimate." I didn't respond. The silence did. Then he slammed his fork down, the sound sharp as a starter pistol. "You're not real," he said. "You're just a low-life dropout who got lucky." The room exhaled. No one moved. The clock behind me ticked once, twice. I heard the word like a brick through glass. Not the volume, the clarity. I folded my napkin, set it beside my plate, and stood. "You never invited me," I said. "I just kept showing up." No one stopped me. Not Mom. Not Clayton. Not the cousins who'd asked me about stock tips 2 years ago and never followed up. As I grabbed my coat from the hook near the front door, Savannah approached. She slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand. "I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner," she whispered. I nodded. "You just did." I stepped onto the porch. The cold hit first, then the stillness. No fireworks, no storm, just a quiet November night in a house I would no longer enter as a son. As I reached into my coat pocket for my keys, something fell. The bracelet. I'd carried since childhood. Blue, pink, and gray threads, uneven and knotted. I looked down at it, lying on the porch boards, like a forgotten part of myself. I didn't pick it up. Didn't kick it either. I just left it. The road unspooled ahead of me like ribbon coming undone. South Carolina pines gave way to Florida palms, the air thickening with salt and possibility. By the time I crossed into Sarasota, the silence inside the car had stopped feeling heavy. It felt earned. No one knew I was coming. No one was waiting. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't mind. The house wasn't much to look at. White stucco, pale green trim, a screen door that sighed when it opened. But it was mine. Inside, bare furniture, scuffed hardwood, light coming in from every window. The kind of light you don't have to earn. It just is. I dropped my bags in the hallway and stood in the middle of the empty living room, still holding my keys like I wasn't sure if I'd stay. The ocean wasn't far. You could hear it faintly, steady, not asking anything of me. Later that afternoon, I called Lee. She answered on the second ring. "Well?" she asked. "I signed," I said. Short pause, then, "Congratulations." We didn't talk numbers, didn't toast, just let the fact exist, quiet and solid. "It'll be public by next week," she added. "You okay with that?" More okay than I thought I'd be. "Good," she said. "Now go build something else. Something just for you." The next morning, I sat in a small office with sea glass walls and a single chair that didn't squeak. Across from me, Dr. Lenora Baines. Mid-50s, steel gray eyes, voice like driftwood, worn smooth by storms. "I'm not here to blame my parents," I told her. "I'm here to stop blaming myself." She nodded. That's a harder habit to break than most people realize. We talked. Or rather, I talked. About the dinner, the word lowlife, the bracelet I left behind. About growing a company and still feeling like a fraud in my father's eyes. She listened without blinking, the kind of presence that made silence feel like progress. Then she asked, "If your child came to you with that story, what would you tell him to do?" I didn't answer right away. But when I did, I didn't hesitate. "I'd tell him to leave," I said, "and not apologize." She smiled. "Good. Now say it like you mean it." I looked her in the eye. "Leave, and don't apologize." And just like that, something in me, something old and clenched, let go. That evening, I bought a roll of nautical rope from a local craft store. Blue, coarse, rough on the fingertips. Not meant for beauty, meant for function. I sat on the porch, legs stretched, fingers fumbling with the strands, trying to remember how I'd made that first bracelet in 5th grade. Back then, I'd used colors I thought Mom would like. This time, I chose a knot that wouldn't come undone. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. The next morning, I signed up for a paddleboard class on a whim. The woman running it introduced herself as Trina McCall. Barefoot, sun-browned, wore her baseball cap backward, and carried herself like someone who'd spent a decade laughing at things that used to keep her up at night. "You're stiff," she said, after watching me wobble for 5 seconds. "Your body already knows balance. Let your mind get out of the way." I fell in. Twice. Came up grinning. We didn't talk about what I did. She didn't ask, and I didn't offer. That felt like healing, too. That night, I grilled something simple and stood barefoot in my kitchen while it sizzled. No noise but the sea. No deadline but the moon. My phone buzzed on the counter. "Savannah. I'm near Tampa. Can we talk?" I looked at the message for a long time. Then I smiled, just slightly, and texted back, "Tell me where." Savannah looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. Then again, I probably didn't look much better. We sat at a beachside cafe just outside Tampa, the kind of place where the umbrellas faded from salt wind and the waiters didn't mind if you nursed one drink for 2 hours. The patio was empty except for us. Mid-afternoon sun painted the railings gold. A slow breeze dragged the smell of ocean and old sunscreen across the table. She stirred her iced tea without drinking it. I pressed my palms flat on the table, as if that could steady the ground beneath us. "I almost didn't come," she said. "Same." We both gave the same tight, exhausted smile, the one siblings give when they've seen too much and said too little. "I let him call you that," she said quietly. "I didn't stop him." "You didn't say it," I said. "That counts for something." "No, Bo, it doesn't." She looked out toward the waves, as if waiting for the tide to explain her silence. "I sat there while he called you a low life. I sat there when Mom looked down at her plate and said nothing. And I didn't do a damn thing. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush to soothe, because this moment wasn't about lifting her guilt. It was about letting her feel the weight of it. After a beat, I said, "I stopped expecting them to protect me a long time ago." She turned back to me. "But you didn't stop showing up." "No," I said. "I just stopped bringing hope with me." The waiter dropped off our drinks. Neither of us touched them. Savannah played with the straw wrapper, twisting it tight between her fingers. "You were the only one carrying us," she said, her voice barely audible over the wind. "And they called you lucky." That hit somewhere I didn't know still ached. I looked at her and saw not just my sister, but a mirror. Someone else shaped by the same house, the same silences, the same impossible expectations. "This isn't about loyalty," I said. "It's about finally being seen." She nodded. "Then let me see you now." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached across the table. She took my hand like she'd been waiting for permission. "I forgive you," I said. And I meant it. No strings, no conditions. Just release. We walked the shoreline afterward, letting the surf nibble at our ankles. "I want to visit your program," she said. "True build." I glanced at her. "Really?" She smiled. "I think I need to learn how to build again, from scratch. And I want to see what you made without them watching." I let that sit, then said, "No need to start over. Let's just start better." That evening, as the sun dragged its final light across my porch, Trina stopped by. "Found something of yours," she said, handing me a small linen pouch. I opened it. The old bracelet, blue, pink, gray, a little more faded, but unmistakable. I saw it by the rocks, figured it meant something. I nodded. It did. Still does. She didn't ask. I didn't explain. That too felt like a kind of grace. Inside, I went to my dresser, laid the old bracelet beside the new the one I'd braided with rough rope, all knots and intention. I didn't compare them. I didn't choose. I just let them lie there, side by side. One from who I was, one from who I'm becoming. And both, finally, had a place to rest. The view from the office was all water. No buildings, no cars, no skyline to remind you who you were trying to impress. Just blue that stretched until it stopped trying. I signed the deal without ceremony. No champagne, no handshake photos. No one clapping in a conference room. Just me, a pen, and silence. Harrison Bell, my attorney, sat across the table, flipping through the last page like he was checking a grocery list. "Biggest check of your life," he said, glancing at me. "And no one's here?" I clicked the pen closed. "That's the point." He nodded, didn't push. That's what I liked about Harrison. He never filled silence for the sake of noise. He slid the folder toward me, crisp and final. "Wire will hit by Monday. Are you sure you don't want a photo with the signature?" "No." I stood, gathering my things. I'm good remembering what this felt like. What did it feel like? I paused. Still. That was the word. Not proud, not euphoric. Still. I drove to the beach, left my shoes in the car, let the sand take my feet like it recognized me. No one else was there, which made sense. This wasn't the kind of moment you share. I walked to the edge of the water and stood there for a while, toes sunk just enough to feel the earth let go. The deal was done. Try on. Mine and not mine anymore. The company had grown into something bigger than me. Now it would belong to people who spoke in profit margins and scale strategies. And I had bought something back. My time. My name. The part of me that wasn't beholden to the hunger of being noticed. When I got home, I opened the drawer where I'd kept the bracelets. The original, blue, pink, and gray, worn thin by years of pocket corners and false starts. The new one, nautical rope, knotted with clumsy care. I reached into my bag and added the third item, the signed final agreement. I didn't frame it, didn't scan it, just placed it next to the bracelets, past and present beside the legacy I'd let go. I closed the drawer gently, not to hide it, just to mark that it was done. The next morning, I made coffee and watched the sun rise. I didn't check my email, didn't scroll. For the first time in over a decade, I had nowhere to be that someone else had built for me. There was a letter in the mailbox, handwritten address, slanted cursive, Aunt Hattie. I opened it slowly, careful with the flap. She always taped them like she expected weather. "Bo, your father was wrong, and he's starting to realize what he lost. I don't know if he'll ever say it out loud. But I want you to know I see you. I always did. You weren't invisible, just inconvenient to his version of success. Love, Hattie." I folded the letter and slid it into my notebook. Didn't read it again. Didn't need to. Sometimes success isn't loud. Sometimes it's the moment you stop begging to be seen, because you finally saw yourself. The folding chairs weren't straight. The projector kept blinking like it had something to say, but forgot the words. Someone brought store-brand cookies instead of the catered tray we'd planned, and the coffee came lukewarm in a borrowed thermos. But when I stepped up to the front of the room, none of that mattered. Every eye looked at me. Not for data, not for a demo. They weren't waiting for credentials. They were waiting to see if someone like them could actually take up space. TrueBuild's first cohort was small. 12 young adults, most in their mid-20s. Some had GEDs. A few had dropped out of college mid-semester. One guy, Darien, had walked out of his last class 3 years ago and never went back, but still read every tech blog before breakfast. They all had that quiet, sideways look about them, like they were used to being stared through. I introduced myself simply. "I'm Bo. I started a company without a degree, and I sold it for more than anyone in my family thought was possible." Some nodded. One girl actually gasped. I smiled, small and honest. "I'm not here to tell you to chase your dream," I said. "I'm here to tell you the dream doesn't require a gate. You don't need permission to build. You need clarity. You already have courage?" Someone in the back raised a hand. He wore a black hoodie, frayed cuffs. Looked like he hadn't slept well in weeks. "I always said I dropped out temporarily," he said, standing. Like it was just a break. Like I'd go back when things calmed down. He looked at the others, then back at me. I'm done lying. I'm not going back. I'm building. Applause started soft, uncertain at first. Then it grew. Not polite, not programmed. Real. 12 people. No parents. No alumni donors. Just hands clapping for the kind of honesty no diploma can teach. After the event, one of the mentees lingered behind. She looked at the True Build logo printed on the banner, an abstract loop of string woven into a strong, knotted circle. "Is that based on something?" she asked. I nodded. "A bracelet I made in 5th grade." She smiled. "That's pretty cool. Most people wouldn't admit that." "Most people didn't get called a lowlife at Thanksgiving," I replied. She didn't ask what I meant. She just handed me her application packet, 3 pages, handwritten, and said, "Thank you for the room." That night, I walked back to my car under a sky that felt earned. Not claimed, not inherited, just earned. Back home, I sat in front of my mic. No script. Just me and the quiet hum of a desk lamp. I hit record. Tonight's episode is called "The Value of Being Uninvited," I began. Because sometimes, the door that never opened gave you time to build one better. I spoke for 12 minutes. Not about business, about worth, about the seat no one saved, and how sometimes, when no one gives you space, you realize you can shape your own. The next morning, a local blog picked up the event. By lunchtime, we had 70 new sign-ups. By evening, the number had tripled. I didn't text anyone from home, didn't check if they'd seen the article. I wasn't waiting anymore. The toast had just landed on my plate when my phone buzzed. "Clayton." "Dad's in the hospital. Minor heart issue. Just thought you should know." I didn't respond right away. Trina was across from me, barefoot as usual, legs tucked up in the chair like she lived outside the rules of breakfast. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, though my fork paused midair. Outside, the beach looked exactly the same, but my stomach had already turned to stone. Later that day, I sat in Dr. Baines's office. The light through the blinds made a grid on the floor, as if even the sun knew how to compartmentalize. I told her about the text, told her I hadn't replied yet. She waited, then asked, "Do you want to fix him, or just not feel guilty?" I exhaled through my nose. "I want to feel done." She nodded. "Then do what brings you peace, not what earns his approval." I looked at the carpet, thought of hospital rooms and IV drips and plastic chairs, thought of the Thanksgiving table, of the word "low life" still echoing like a tuning fork I never asked to hold. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want reconciliation. I just wanted release. That evening, I called the hospital's flower service. "Something simple," I told them. "Greens and whites. No lilies." They asked for a card. I thought for a moment, then said, "Right. Wishing you healing. Bo." That was it. No visit. No call, just flowers. And when the delivery driver asked for the room number, I had to double-check Clayton's text. Because even now, I didn't know where to send something soft inside a space that had never made room for me. The next morning, I opened the drawer with the bracelets. Old and new. I took the old one, the one I left on the porch that night, and tied it gently around the flower bouquet before the courier picked it up. Not as a peace offering, not as guilt, as closure. I told myself I didn't care if he recognized it, but I knew he would. Some things can be ignored for years, but not erased. Clayton texted again in the afternoon. "Dad's disappointed you didn't come." I stared at it, felt nothing rise, no rage, no shame, just a kind of gravity finally letting go. I replied, "He's always been." No response after that, and honestly, that silence felt like a gift. That night, As I made tea, Savannah's name lit up my screen. Her text was short. No punctuation, no overthinking. Dad cried this morning. That's never happened before. I sat with the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Sometimes breaking is what makes people real, but that's his road, not mine." I hit send, and finally, meant every word. The fire pit crackled gently. No speeches, no announcements, no list of achievements read aloud like an obituary for time lost. Just laughter, just warmth, just enough chairs. In my backyard, under a sky softened by dusk, the people I'd invited weren't gathered by blood, but by belief. Belief that they belonged here. And that was enough. The true-billed mentees came early. Some brought casserole dishes still hot from the oven. One brought a guitar he never played, just held it like something sacred. Savannah arrived with a pie, and the kind of smile I hadn't seen since we were kids, and the world hadn't yet taught us to sit quietly while someone else claimed the spotlight. Trina arranged string lights like she was decorating a feeling, and in the middle of it all, no one fought for a seat. There was room for everyone. A mentee named Issa sat on a woven stool near the fire, sipping something with lemon and too much ice. "You built this space without telling us how to earn it," she said. I leaned forward, letting the fire's glow touch my hands. "Because you don't," I said. "That's the whole point." She smiled like she might cry, then looked away, ashamed to be seen soft. I understood. We were all trying to believe we deserved peace. Savannah stood later with a glass of cider raised. "I'd like to say something," she said. The group fell quiet, not from obligation, but from respect. She looked at me. "To my brother," she began, "for choosing peace when pride was easier, for choosing space where there was none, for showing me that leaving doesn't always mean giving up. Sometimes it means giving yourself a chance to breathe." I didn't know what to do with my face, so I just looked down at my drink, at the condensation, at my reflection, warped but still intact. Someone started clapping. Then everyone did. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an imposter at a party thrown for me. I felt home. As the night softened further, people peeled away, hugging, thanking, promising to come back for the next one. I stayed behind, gathering cups and plates, folding blankets. And then I saw it. One chair still there, untouched, unused. I'd put it out intentionally, not for someone late, but for someone who never asked. I carried it inside, not mournfully, not hopefully, just consciously. I placed it beside the dresser where I kept the two bracelets. One was childhood, one was survival. The chair joined them, not as an invitation, but as a reminder. That space exists, but it's not owed, it's not automatic. It must be respected. The next morning, a letter sat in my mailbox. Not an email, not a text, an actual envelope, handwritten, slanted cursive I hadn't seen in years. "Bo, if you're willing to talk, I'd like to try." Mom. No promises, no explanations. Just a hand reaching across a distance. I didn't open it further. Didn't need to. The message was already there. And for the first time, I wasn't rushing to be accepted. I was deciding whether they had earned the right to sit down. The envelope sat on my desk for 2 days. It didn't stare at me, didn't whisper, just waited. Like something that already knew I'd open it when I was ready, not a second before. When I finally did, it opened quietly. The first line read, "Your father's weaker now, and I miss your voice." No greeting, no bow, just that soft manipulation disguised as care. It was raining outside, not a storm. Just steady whispering rain that matched the way grief sometimes arrives. not all at once, but in drips you can't ignore. I sat with the letter in my lap. The old string bracelet lay near the window, untouched. Its colors dull now. Pink, blue, gray, turned the color of memory. I read the letter twice. There were mentions of Clayton's stress, a line about how the holidays felt emptier this year, and a question buried near the end. Can we go back? That was the part that made me stand. I walked to the kitchen, made tea, let the kettle boil longer than it needed to. I wasn't trying to stall. I was trying to be sure. Then I dialed. She picked up after 2 rings. I didn't know if you'd call, she said. I almost didn't, I replied. There was a pause, neither warm nor cold, just air filling space where years had gone. I meant what I wrote, she said. We miss you. Do you mean me? I asked, or the version of me that didn't ask to be seen? She didn't answer that. Instead, your father, he's softer now, tired. He's been thinking about things. That's good, I said. Thinking's a start. She sighed. We didn't know. Not really. About how it made you feel. I looked out at the rain. That's what I told myself. For a long time. She was quiet again. Then, can we go back? I closed my eyes. No, I said. But we can go honest. She inhaled sharply, like she hadn't expected that answer. I leaned forward. Did you see me hurting back then? There was a long pause. The kind you only get once, maybe twice in a relationship. The kind that decides if the next word is truth or retreat. I do now, she said, and I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner. I didn't cry, didn't shatter. But something inside me exhaled, a place that had held its breath for too many years. It wasn't about needing the apology, I said. It was about no longer apologizing for needing one. I understand, she whispered. No, I said gently. But you're trying. That matters. She asked if we could talk more often. I said yes, then added, but I won't be the bridge anymore unless there's respect on both sides. She agreed. Or at least she didn't argue. That was enough for now. After we hung up, I lit a candle. Not out of grief, not for sentiment, but for the moment, to mark that something had shifted. I placed the letter next to it, not framed, not folded, just resting. The rain slowed to a hush, and just as I reached for the kettle to pour a second cup, my phone buzzed. Savannah. Dad's agreed to meet, her message said, but only in your city, not his terms anymore. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I smiled, not because it fixed anything, but because it didn't come with an asterisk this time. Dad showed up 10 minutes early. That alone was new. He stood just outside the gate of the outdoor cafe, looking down at the sidewalk like he wasn't sure if he'd found the right place or the right moment. I watched him through the slatted wooden divider near the patio, holding my coffee with both hands. The breeze off the bay carried just enough salt to make the air feel honest. He spotted me, straightened his spine, and walked over without waiting to be waved in. That too was new. Nice setup you've got here, he said, nodding toward the view. The water, the quiet, the absence of pressure. It's not for show, I replied, meaning it. He looked at me. That's not what I meant. A pause. Maybe it is. We sat. No one reached across the table. No hug. Just the sound of chairs scraping against stone and the gentle clink of silverware from a few tables down. He ordered black coffee. Nothing else. I didn't comment on it. I heard from your mother, he began. She said you wanted to talk. I did. I stirred my coffee, but not about fixing things. He nodded slowly. Figured as much. We sat for a moment in silence. Not the heavy kind that says something's wrong, but the rare kind that says you're trying not to say the wrong thing. "This place suits you," he offered. "I think it suits who I'm becoming." He looked down at his hands, then up again. "You look settled." "I am." Another pause. "But we should talk about the last time we were in a room together." His jaw twitched. "Thanksgiving." "Yeah." I didn't raise my voice, didn't let my shoulders tense. "You called me a lowlife." He winced, barely, looked out toward the bay. "If that's all you remember," he said quietly, "then I failed worse than I thought." I let that sit, not because I needed to savor it, but because some words need room to echo. "I didn't come here for an apology," I told him. "I came to make sure you knew I no longer needed one to sleep." He nodded once. "Then I won't offer one." I raised an eyebrow. "But I'll offer something else," he added. "A chance to have a conversation we probably should have had 20 years ago." "About what?" He shrugged. "About anything that isn't what I think you should be." We didn't finish our coffee, didn't hug goodbye. But as we stood to leave, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded brochure. True Build, printed from the website, creased but not torn. "I've been reading," he said. "Thought it was all fluff at first. But it's not." I said nothing. Just took the brochure from his hand and tucked it into my jacket. We walked opposite directions. No drama, no closure. Just two men trying to stop speaking in monologues. That night, Mom called. "How did it go?" she asked. I paused. "Not healing?" I said. "Not hurting, just beginning." She didn't ask more. Maybe that was her own version of growth. The next day I mailed 2 packages. One for her, one for him. Each contained the same thing, a framed photo of the first True Build cohort. 12 young faces, hopeful and proud. Tucked behind the frame was a note, handwritten. "This is what I built while I was disappearing from your eyes." I didn't expect a response. Didn't need one. Some letters are meant to be read in silence. And maybe that's where understanding finally begins. The email came just after sunrise. No subject line, no signature. Just plain text from a mentee I'd nearly forgotten I met. I turned down a job. They said I needed credentials. I said I already had proof me. I sat back in my chair, coffee cooling on the desk beside me, and read it again. Then again. Some mornings come with a quiet that doesn't ask to be noticed. This one felt like that. True Build had grown past me. What started with a dozen mismatched chairs in a community room now had its own building, a part-time staff, and a waiting list. We weren't fixing resumes. We were reminding people they'd never needed fixing to begin with. I just finished taping a TEDx talk called "Success is Quiet When It's Real." I didn't rehearse it. I didn't wear a suit. I spoke the way I always wished someone had spoken to me, like truth wasn't a sales pitch, like clarity didn't need volume. That night, Trina and I sat on the porch. She watched the tide roll in. I watched the inbox light up, slowly, steadily. People writing in from Iowa, Oregon, even someone from Singapore. "How does it feel?" she asked, seeing them rise. I took a sip of wine. "Like watching parts of myself outrun where I started?" She smiled. "That sounds like poetry." "No," I said. "It sounds like survival." A week later, the podcast crossed 1 million listens. Not because of algorithms, because of people sharing links over coffee in group chats with strangers in co-working spaces. Because someone heard me say, "You don't have to earn worth. You just have to remember it." And whispered back, That's me. I once begged for someone to say, I see you. Now, strangers wrote, thank you for helping me see myself. It didn't fill the space my father had left, but it lit the parts of me I used to keep hidden. An invitation arrived in the mail, actual paper, thick and cream-colored, National Resilience Conference, keynote speaker slot. I stared at it longer than I meant to, then smiled, not because I wanted the stage, because I knew I didn't need it. Still, I said yes. That evening, my phone buzzed. Clayton. Mom wants to know if she can buy one of your bracelets. I didn't answer right away. I walked to my workshop, the one I'd built in the sunroom, and opened the drawer. The old string was still there. So was the nautical rope. I took out both and laid them side by side. Then I wrapped 2 bracelets, one blue, one gray. Simple, honest. No clasps, no polish, just knots that knew what they were holding. I boxed them carefully and included a small, handwritten card. You don't wear this for show. You wear it for the weight it once carried. I sealed the box. Didn't address it yet. That part, I'd decide tomorrow. The porch lights gave off a warm, gold hush. New Year's Eve in Florida felt more like spring in Carolina. Soft wind, barefoot grass, the smell of citrus and wood smoke mingling in the air. The fire pit cracked occasionally, like it was speaking in an old language only quiet people understood. Everyone had a seat. No one asked where to go. No one waited to be told they belonged. And one chair remained empty. On purpose. Savannah was curled in a chair beside Trina, legs pulled up, her face flushed from the fire. True-billed mentees scattered around the patio, knees brushing knees, holding mismatched mugs and stories too heavy to say aloud. Low music played from a speaker set in the window, nothing upbeat, nothing grand, just rhythm, like breath. Do you ever regret walking away? Savannah asked. I sipped cider, slow. I regret thinking I had to state a matter. She looked at me and nodded, not in pity, but in understanding. A mentee approached, Mason, shy and brilliant, holding a piece of poster board folded 3 times. He handed it to me like it might break. I made something, he said. I opened it slowly. A hand-drawn tree. The trunk strong, dark, sturdy. The branches wide, reaching. And the roots, bracelets, string, knotwork, loops drawn from memory. You're the roots, he said, eyes low. I couldn't speak, just touched the drawing and nodded. Later, when the sky turned navy and the countdown was still hours away, I stood beside the fire and looked around. No spotlight, no microphone, just a man with a story everyone already knew. You didn't get here because someone said yes, I said to them. You got here because you stopped needing one. They didn't clap. They didn't need to. A few smiled. One person cried, but mostly they held still. Like you do when you're finally safe. Inside, I added the poster to the wall beside the display case. 2 bracelets, 1 contract. And now, 1 empty chair, painted white, placed gently beneath a sign that read, "For those who chose themselves." It wasn't a museum. It wasn't nostalgia. It was an altar to decision. At midnight, I uploaded the final podcast episode of the year. The title blinked on the screen. I made a 15 members business, supported my family. Then Dad called me a lowlife. So I moved to Florida and became my own home. I didn't hit publish right away. Just stared at the sentence, at how it once felt like a wound, and now felt like a road. Then I clicked, let it go live, let it be true. Out on the porch, the fire was almost out. The stars above were ordinary and astonishing all at once. Trina touched my shoulder as she passed by, then left me there. not because I needed to be alone, but because I finally knew how to stand still with myself. I looked at the empty chair one last time, then whispered into the air that carried the scent of oranges and ash. I didn't need the chair. I needed to stop apologizing for building my own. And with that, the year turned. Quietly. Like it knew this one, finally, belonged to me. You spend a long time thinking healing will feel like a grand moment, like someone finally saying, "I'm proud of you," or a door swinging open just because you knocked long enough. But it doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes healing is quiet. Sometimes it's as simple as learning to stop knocking. I didn't rebuild my life to prove anything anymore. Not to my father, not to my mother, not to the version of me that kept showing up with hope in his hands. I rebuilt it because I was tired of shrinking. Now, when I look around at this life, this porch, these people, this stillness, I realize I don't miss what I lost. I'm grateful for what I gained when I stopped asking for permission. I didn't get the story I wanted growing up, but I wrote a better ending than I expected. Not because I fixed everything, but because I stopped trying to be what others needed and started becoming who I actually was. And in the end, maybe that's what family can be. Not just blood or obligation, but the people who don't need you to audition for belonging. Somewhere between silence and peace, I found myself. And that, quietly, gently, is enough. If this story resonated with you, even in a quiet, familiar way, please we share stories that speak to the heart and honor the journey of becoming. Explore more stories like this on our channel. You might just find yourself in one of them. If this story resonated with you, even in a quiet, familiar way, please we share stories that speak to the heart and honor the journey of becoming. Explore more stories like this on our channel. You might just find yourself in one of them.